Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Onion Soup, the show where we pull back the layers of metaphysics and reality in order to demystify spirituality. Today, I'm truly excited to have our guest, Marina. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Doing pretty wonderful. It's such a beautiful day out here. So, tell us a little tell us a little bit about man, I can talk. Somatic coaching and what that is and what do you do?
It's a really cool way to get really deep into the body and into the subconscious. We often hear the subconscious mind, but really the subconscious is in the body. So it's a way to work with our sensations, with our emotions for really deep healing, whether it's for your relationships, your business, your career, any goals, especially if you're feeling really stuck. It's a really powerful way to move through that.
Can you dive deeper into what you mean by subconscious is in the body?
Yeah. Have you ever seen that image of like the iceberg and it says the conscious is at the very top, like what we can see of the
Mm.
iceberg? And then we have the subconscious and then we have the unconscious, and that's like under the water. Around 90% of our behavior is actually determined by the subconscious and the unconscious. And because if we look at us, most of us is our body, right? Our brain is like such a small amount of us. And it's when you think about like if you have a habit and you're like, okay, I decided I'm going to change this habit, and then you don't, right? For the longest time, like you're still stuck, you're still doing it, or like so many human behaviors. And we think that if we just change the way we think about it, or we do like mindset work, then it's going to change, but it doesn't. We get stuck and then we feel shame, and there's like so many things around it. And really, what's happening is that our traumas, our past experiences that have a really big imprint on us, all it can also be a positive imprint too, that actually lives in the body because we have a nerve called the vagus nerve,
Yeah.
and that nerve is sending 80% of the information from the body to the brain, not the other way around. And that's why so much of the information that we process that determines our behavior is actually in our bodies.
Wow, interesting. So you specifically just help people to work through the physical trauma, the traumas that have been built up throughout their childhood and things like that, and just push it out of the body.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really accessing it, not even through the story, but through, I like to work with triggers. That's my favorite kind of topic. And just to see, how we all of a sudden become really reactive and it's like not clear why. It's not logical because we're overreacting to the situation. And so through that, we explore what's happening in terms of our sensations in our body. And those lead back to, well, when is the first time you felt this way? Because if I ask, when is the first time this happened to you? That's not a good question because it might be a totally different event or circumstance. So it's really about when you have felt this way for the first time, that's where that trauma lives. And the sensation is going to lead you there.
How do you help people to discover that within themselves? And also, how do you help them do it without having a mental breakdown?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, maybe let's start with the second one. That's really important because when we access past trauma and we want to heal it, the most important thing is to feel safe. Because if you're running away from the lion, right? Because that's what we feel when we're triggered, like we feel unsafe, we feel like we're in danger. It really doesn't make any sense to have emotions, like to stop everything, to process and to feel whatever emotions are coming up. So how it's different to process your trauma rather than re-traumatizing yourself, like almost going through the trauma again in the present day. What we do differently is we first find safety. So we first create safety, and we do that not by saying, hey, you are safe. Again, that's not going to work, right? Because it's like a feeling, it's not a thought. So how we do that is through breath and sound and movement. And there's so many different nervous system regulating practices out there that come from different traditions, and a lot of ancient wisdom and a lot of present day wisdom kind of mixed together. And what we do as we are doing this breath or these sounds or these movements is actually noticing in the body the shift. Like, oh, I have more space. I feel lighter. I feel more present. I can see more colors. I can see, the whole picture rather than a really small focus of the picture. So, all of these beautiful changes, and my breath is different, my heart rate is different, I feel safer. Now we can dive into the trigger, and we really do that for your first question. I guide people. They kind of sit with their eyes closed. It's almost like a meditation, but it's more
Mm,
a practice of noticing what they're feeling and connecting to that and allowing that to guide them to the first time that they have experienced this similar feeling. And then we really work through it together. We allow the emotions to come up. We really allow it to be seen and processed.
interesting. Is that almost like a regression?
In a way, because when you are triggered, you are time traveling, right? Like you don't experience the present moment. You experience all of a sudden you're like 5 or 3. So we want to go back to 5 and 3, but not as a 5 or 3 year old, because a lot
Mm,
of times, I guess in a regression, like we merge with that immaturity in the moment, and like we're very reactive because the child state just like takes over our bodies and we react from that. But what we're trying to do is actually feel, oh, I am an adult now and I'm actually here present for the child. So I'm not the child. I'm actually here for this child to tell this child, I'm going to keep you safe. I want you to express everything you didn't express. And please move back, like back away, because I am handling the situation. Like, you don't need to be in this relationship. You don't need to solve this money issue. Like, I am doing it because I'm now an adult.
mm. I love that. I actually oftentimes tell people that the point of shadow work or inner child work is to be the adult that you needed as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And to come from a place of non-judgment, because you wouldn't judge a child when they're frustrated, angry, afraid. You would help them, you would coach them, and you would really give them some love.
Beautiful. I love that.
So, in your experience, is there a particular type of, like, breath work or pranayama that works for or, like, across the board that somebody can get started with today? Or does it seem to change with different people?
It definitely changes, but I think some nice ones to try. We can all try different ones to see how it goes. Like one that I really like is you inhale and on the exhale, you hum. Like
Mm,
you make a humming sound and you do that several times. Another one is on the exhale, you make the sound shh, like you're telling someone to be quiet. So those are kind of like gentle ones to just try. And I will say that if you're somebody who has a lot of trauma, this actually will not work because you're not connected to your body. Most likely, you can't feel anything. Maybe you feel very numb. So, that's the first thing we would work on rather than, regulating. When you're regulating, you actually have to feel it, like the difference between the two states.
mhm.
If you're not feeling anything, then we would really work on that piece first.
Ooh, let's dive into that. So, a lot of times I can definitely resonate with that. I used to be very depressed and very angry, if you could believe it. But I wasn't very in my body. I was constantly in my head.
Mhm.
And the way that I was able to recognize that was I was a very heavy drinker at the time. And I realized that that was my body's way of screaming at me saying that, you know, "I'm gonna make you feel something physical so that way you can bring your attention back." And I also
Mm.
used to overeat a lot and have a lot of junk food, and I felt bloated, but that was kind of the only way I could get into my body. It wasn't until I put those things away, started exercising, and found another way to reconnect with my body.
That makes so much sense. I love how you shared that. And just like addictions in general are really about bringing up, like numbing the pain. But I love also how you put it that it's calling your attention to like feel your body. But people who are so disconnected or overthinking all the time, and we all do it in
Mhm,
moments, right? I used to also be like 90% of the time feeling nothing. Like I didn't even know I had a body. It was crazy. But people who are like that have had a lot of trauma, and so they have this protection. It's actually a really brilliant way to protect yourself,
mhm.
to not just feel that all the time. If they felt it all the time all day long, it would be so overwhelming. So we can get annoyed at these states that our body goes into unconsciously without us telling it, like, please be numb. But we can be so compassionate about it too,
Mm,
because it's actually so helpful. And then as we start to do the healing work, like what I noticed is being more discerning of, like, when do I need to numb out, because we all do. It's normal. Like, nobody walks around always feeling everything. That's
mm.
really too much. And when do I need to really be present to my experience?
I love that. I love the idea of quote unquote numbing out sometimes. So when I actually take people through like a almost like a more advanced meditation, I allow people to I want you to feel your body, but then I want you to expand and feel the space around you. But then I want you to contract again and go back and feeling your body. So you need to be able to ultimately do both. And this is how you're able to feel your body and expand and feel the space around you. You need to recognize that all is one and one is the all and kinda have that divide as well.
That's so brilliant. The I don't Are you familiar with Peter Levine?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you know how he always does, like, he had, I don't know what the toy is called. It's like maybe a children's toy that he like expands it and
Mhm.
contracts it, and that's like exactly how the nervous system works. And so many people think that we just need to grow and grow and grow and like keep growing all the time, and that would be so terrifying, and we would totally crash, because our nervous system doesn't work that way. So I really love that you do that in a form of meditation.
Yeah, if you were to continuously expand, imagine a bubble or a balloon. If you continuously put air into it, it's going to pop, and it's probably gonna pop eventually. But if you put air into it and then deflate it, and then put more air back into it and then deflate it, what you're actually doing is you're stretching the fibers of that rubber so it can contain more air each and every time. Our bodies are exactly like that. Our consciousness is like that.
That's such a cool way of putting it. I love that.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? So I really want to dive into you were talking about all of this interacting with the vagus nerve and the vagus nerve really being the connection between our bodies and our minds. Can you dive a little bit more deeply into what the vagus nerve is and how that interaction works?
Yeah, it's one of the most powerful cranial nerves that we have, that is sending information. And it's called vagus nerve because it's a traveling nerve. So it goes from the bottom of your skull, basically, all the way through your digestive system and your lungs, and all the way through your torso. And so it's hitting like so many organs. And that's why stress is so impactful, because when you are stressed, those signals are going, it's dual directional, right? So it's going from the brain to the body and from the body to the brain. And that's why it's so impactful when we're stressed, on our digestion, on our breathing, on our heart rate. This nerve connects all of these pieces together, but again, 80% of the information is going from the body to the brain. So let's say you're in a room and there's no danger, right? You just like know it. You know it in your head that there's no danger. But something is triggering you into a past trauma, like maybe even a text that you got. And so the information, the sensations, like let's say your chest is really constricted, your stomach feels heavy, maybe you feel even nauseous. All of that is going to go up to your brain as information that you're in danger, literally as if a lion was chasing you, even though that's not happening. So I find that so fascinating.
But how do you break through that? 'Cause that's a very physical reaction. How do you stop your body from having those type of physical reactions?
So we can't really stop it, because we actually need that, because if there was a lion, it would be really good to run away. So we don't want to stop this automatic function of the autonomic nervous system. What we want to do is just, I'm sure you practice this too, like through awareness of, oh, I'm overreacting in my behavior, or I'm having really intense thoughts that are not matching the reality, or I'm having really intense emotions and sensations. Those are kind of like the four pathways that I help clients gain awareness through. And as you become aware, and you might not do it in the moment, you might do it the next day. Oh, wow, that was interesting. Like, I want to look at that, right? Or you might be able to do it in the moment. There's so many practices that we can use to ground ourselves. one brilliant one by Peter Levine is orienting. So that's actually like
Mhm.
looking around in the space, looking all around your space and feeling the safety. There's no danger here or here or here. Like I see it and I notice it and I sense it in my body. So that's one example. But all of those practices of the breath and the sound and the movement, they all help us get out of that state of danger. So that's like one piece. But the other one is the healing of trauma, because if we can constantly regulate, which would be really exhausting every single day, without addressing like what's actually causing the dysregulation, which is past traumatic events from our lifetime or from even our ancestors. And
Mhm.
so really working through that in a safe environment will decrease how much we kind of misread the reality, like we feel unsafe when we're actually physically safe.
Wow, I love that. So, say like someone walked directly into your studio or into your office, the first thing that you would do with them is what? Sit down and look at past life trauma, not past life, excuse me, but look at previous traumas, and then you start trying to identify that, and then do you take them directly into look around, you're safe, you're okay, and then we move into sound, movement, and breath.
That's a cool way of putting it. So, well, when I work with people, it's typically for longer time periods. So, at first, I would get to know, what are their goals. And so we
Mm,
work based off of that as like a background idea. Okay, these are my goals, these are the things that I'm struggling with. And then we start to just notice their everyday triggers. So they would usually people come. I work a lot with people with childhood emotional neglect. So they really struggle to feel their emotions, and they just like struggle with emotions. They struggle to express their emotions, to notice, to feel them. And they maybe are overworking or just doing many things to like not be in touch with that, and that's getting in the way of their goals, which is really
mm,
interesting. They think that they can work really, really hard to get their goals, but really what they need to do is go inward and move through their emotions. So we would look at like the triggers coming up, let's say, oh my God, this client said no to me and I got rejected. So horrible, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's pause here. What are you noticing as you're talking about this? What's happening for you? And yes, we might regulate if it's like really, really like they're really overwhelmed talking about it. Maybe they're more grounded talking about it. Okay, well, let's explore this together. So, what's coming up for you? What does this remind you of? And with some people, it's quick because they'll link the past with the present pretty easily. And with some people, it takes many, many sessions to even kind of make that connection because they think their childhood was really normal and wonderful, and in reality, they experienced emotional neglect. And they don't even think that that's a bad thing. It seems very normal to us, right? So even seeing that can take a lot of time. And then, doing a lot of that inner child work in so many ways, and parts work, like giving that child what they needed and starting to create a relationship where the adult, you, is now the parent of the child rather than your clients. Because when you're expecting your clients to make you feel better and that's not going to happen, you need to learn to make you feel better. That's
yes.
really what is needed.
Why do you think so many of us have childhood neglect?
I think that the generation of our parents, even though they were like maybe a little bit less in survival mode, our grandparents were probably like next level in survival mode, right? Our
Mm,
parents maybe a little bit better, but still they didn't really have the awareness of about emotions. Like many of my clients, it's either like get over yourself or here's some ice cream or let's do something positive, where it's like what needed to happen is your parents needed to actually teach you it's safe to feel. It's a good thing. Oh, you're angry? Okay, great. Let's go yell together. Let's push the wall together. And like, whose parents really did that? I think very, very few of us. So, yeah, they were neglecting their own emotions, I think. And they were also not having the tools to teach us how to work with ours.
Mhm. I actually love when you mention, give the child some ice cream because I think that's a very common way, at least in my childhood, that you pacify the child. You if your child is having a bad day or negative experience, the fastest, and we do this as adults, this is why a lot of us here in America eat a lot of sugar, is that you give your kids some sugar to instantly switch their brain over from the depression, the trauma, the sadness back into happiness. But it's that instant dopamine hit, and a lot of us just haven't moved past that.
Yeah, it's so true. And then that's what we learn, right? The way to self soothe is to eat something delicious. And I'm not saying it's always a bad thing,
Mhm,
but if that's the only pathway we have to soothe ourselves, that's a problem because we need many more pathways. We need the ability to connect with other people around emotions, which is very soothing, and also to connect to ourselves and soothe ourselves through, expressing that anger like in our own space and feeling safe to do that, or expressing the sadness. And very few of us, I had to learn from scratch for sure.
Yeah, learning different coping mechanisms can be pretty challenging, especially when you're doing it by yourself. But I really want to jump into, you mentioned movement and music. So what type of movement do you recommend for people?
Generally, I love to help people connect to their body to where they can just move in a way that their body wants. So even when we have an emotion, that is a movement, right? Like sadness is wanting to get small and curl in. Anger is wanting to get big. So each one really has a movement associated with it. So it's not that I teach specific like dance or anything like that, but it's more can be super subtle. For instance, one common thing that I practice with clients is when they're scared or when they're feeling sad or when they're just like discouraged or disappointed, getting into a little ball and staying there, which feels very safe to us when we're feeling like that. And then really slowly coming up and rolling their shoulders back and sitting up. And that is exactly the meditation you mentioned. It's like the contraction and the expansion. So that's an example.
Interesting, interesting. I love that. My first thought when you said that was for me when I get sad and I feel as if I want to pull back from society and become a recluse, I actually go outside. And because for me, being someone that dealt with depression, I know that it's not healthy for me to sit in the house in my own sadness. So I'll just go outside and be expansive by myself, if that makes sense. Be expansive with the universe and nature. It's same thing with anger. So whenever I'm angry or upset, when it does happen to happen, I usually just walk away. And like you said, with anger, we tend to want to be big and we want to blow up. But just walk away instead of being big, just being more subtle and being calm and coming back to the situation in that calmness.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning is like maybe finding safety for yourself and
Mm,
then being able to approach it from there. And sometimes the way we find safety is by giving in to the impulse. And I'm not suggesting yelling at other people, but it's more, in your own space. If you are feeling like that rage come up, it's really good to allow that in your own space and find safety through that, because it's rage is not about the present moment. Anger could be, frustration could be, but rage is like a really big emotion, and it's most likely, unless something truly
mhm,
bad is happening, that you actually are unsafe and someone is crossing your boundaries, then rage makes total sense. But if nothing like that extreme is happening, what's happening is a past trauma, a
mhm.
past rage of a little child. And so expressing that is so healing when you're very conscious of that. Like, oh, I'm actually doing something for the child, me right now.
Yeah, I love that. I really wanna reiterate what you just said about, it's not that anger and rage are bad emotions. There are no bad emotions. They do serve a purpose. If there is something seriously going on, then you need to address that situation. If you are actually unsafe, then address that situation. Sometimes you have to be aggressive in certain
Yeah,
situations, and that's okay. And those are extremes, but it's also a very powerful energy. So when you're trying to find a healthy, safe outlet for it, for me back then, when I was in the military, I was part of the fight club, so I would go to different competitions and things like that, and I loved martial arts. That's a very healthy outlet. And there are a lot of people who paint, there are people who sing, there are people who write. So there are really healthy outlets for this.
I love that.
Yeah, but we only have a few minutes left. Is there anything you want to leave with the audience, Marina, before we go?
I would say compassion, always coming back to compassion for yourself of wherever you're at, wherever you are in the process, and knowing that even us that you're hearing us, we're not perfect and we get triggered and we are humans just like you. I think that's very soothing for people to know.
Yeah, I love that, and it's very important. We are all human. We all have ups and downs. The vast majority of us are not always in this high upper vibrational space. you know, we have lives. But thank you, Marita, so much for coming on. And before we go, I do want to ask, where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
The easiest is on Instagram, and I'm at marina.y.t.
Also, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in for this episode of Onion Soup. I hope you all have a beautiful, wonderful day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.